They went through the extensive research to do all that. We actually incorporated what they had addressed under our land plan. Yes, it is.
So the West Belgium, there was a mix of residential, commercial uses that were prescribed through there.
Yeah, any BLM access points for the river?
I do not believe there was any added access points as part of that.
Thank you, Jason.
Again, I'm trying to make this as informal and as helpful as we can be. We have Commissioner John Lawson that joined us here, slipped in the door on us. So.
Sorry for being a little tardy. I just drove 520 miles. Just got here.
Well, welcome. I'm glad you're here safe.
Pardon me?
From where?
Great Falls, Montana.
Any snow up there yet?
Yeah, I had snowstorms and rain all the way from Great Falls to Billings, and then it was good after that.
I'm not sure that's good.
Some folks are still counting. Specifically questions, what's on your mind? And if it's a zoning or a building issue, we can answer those also.
I got it. Go ahead. Okay, your land use plan that you're doing right now, with the loss of our unemployment right now is basically 7.2% or 6.0%. And with that, this KLJ or KMJ, whatever they are, I don't see any. I see 5 problems right off the back. It says use an established projection. This is out of your deal offline. And it says use an established projection methodologies. A reasonable estimate would be 111,000 people in Natrona County in 2040. I don't think we're going to make it, boys. Okay, the second one, which will boost retail spending and drive commercial development. I don't see that going to happen either. Number 3, increase in schools, parks, recreation facilities. We're going to have to slow down on that as well. Kids are leaving, people are leaving. Number 5, infrastructure improvement will be needed to manage the demand for placement. I think they need to go back to the drawing board. We're losing people quicker than we can hold them. I mean, even our company had to lay off 8 of our employees, and we've been strong for 20 years here. And anyway, that's kind of where I was going to go with it, is that, you know, these models that these consultants come up with and stuff are all great and dandy, but when we hit our bus cycle, they're virtually meaningless.
Okay, Judy, I guess to answer your question, yeah. This was our best guess, if you will, in 2014 where the population growth was going. The beauty of this is a land use plan. So we are not doing any of the growth. This is when developers come to us and want to develop pieces of property. So if the economy's not there, the developers aren't going to be coming to us. This land use plan then will be there on the shelf for when the economy does improve, and we'll be better prepared for that when it does happen.
Okay, thank you.
Your comment is duly noted that, yes, the 2014...
Yeah, it's like any other model. They come up with whatever they want to or what they think is going to happen, but that's not the realities of what is happening. So.
And when we've put this in here, we've put a preface on that it was related to what KLJ predicted in 2014.
Do you know how much we paid these guys so far, just by chance?
I can sure get that exact information. It was partially funded through a state grant and through...
Because I know we gave them,
Was it even a County fund?
68,000 the first time, and then...
Wyoming Business Council? Is that correct?
Business Council.
It was, Judy, that was funded through a Wyoming Business Council grant, and I can get you the exact dollar.
I would appreciate that. And then what do we pay them this time?
There was only one contract.
Okay, because the first one was 68,000 that I knew of. And then they went in front of the commissioners, what was it, last spring? For another, God, I want to say 98,000. I'd like to see a total amount of what we paid these guys for this design, is
We've
basically.
only had one contract for our development plan with KLJ. It estimated about 45,000,
Okay,
but I can get you that total. That's
Yeah,
the
I would
contract
appreciate that,
this
Trish.
department's had.
okay. Linda had a question?
I am concerned that as this land use grows and you're mentioning the contractors come to you, the realtors, the developers come to you. My concern is the federal funding that comes along with that. That needs, an example is the area that just got moved into the city of Mills. The federal
Robertson Road.
grant funding on that allowed for county land to be developed, and then within 3 years, then the city of Mills, in that specific example, is able to grow.
Annex it in.
Right, annex it in. And so that's a concern for me, because I like living in the county. I like less restrictions on my property rights. We maintain our own roads and we do a wonderful job of it. You know, I don't want that federal money to affect my land use. So what's the protection of the landowner to stay ahead of that?
I'm not aware of that.
I think she's talking about Robertson Road when, what is that, Tyler's development? That is right there, just off of Poison Spider.
The county's point of view in this land use plan, I mean, we can sure use that one as a wonderful example. The first phase was done before I came on to the county, but the second phase, I was here. So that was a prime example of a zone change. This would be another good example.
Which property you're talking about?
Okay, so we are talking about the property that is roughly at the corner of Robertson Road and
Poison Spider.
There's a housing subdivision that has occurred there on the east side of Robertson Road.
Correct.
Correct.
So some of that property in there was zoned urban agricultural.
Mm-hmm.
The land use plan spoke of that should be developed as industrial and commercial properties. They were seeing the town of Mills growing. We
Traded land.
adapted and said this land use plan 1998, the obvious growth is residential in that area. We believe residential is compatible in that area, and so the land use plan would guide us to the residential side. So we would go from a zone change from urban ag to residential, and we were guided in that direction because they would say we can provide, that has city water and sewer, so it's got public utilities to that property, so we can go to the higher density properties in there. So then after the zone change was approved, then we approved the subdivision where we divided the lots up, and then they were sold. Back to your question, Linda, I'm not aware of Keith Tyler receiving federal funds, and you'd have to ask Keith Tyler if he did. We were not a party to any of those development funds. That's a private developer comes to Natrona County and says, I want to do a zone change in a subdivision in this location. Would you support it or not? And we go through the public hearings, notify folks, look at our development plan and our zoning document, and work through the process.
Well, an example of that is I go to city council meetings as
Okay.
well. The city council is quite aware of that federal grant money, and I would think the commissioners would be aware of it as well, because it's almost probably a pass-through grant, because it would have to be
Okay, by both.
given approval to pass through. But that was part of the ability for them to get federal funding, was that the land is to be annexed then into the closest city because they took the federal grant money. Now, my concern about that would be something that the property owner would probably have to be aware of it. My concern about that is the new federal grant money has something about effectually furthering fair housing, where the adjoining land subdivisions are automatically required to comply with the regulations of the new federal housing grants. So,
You know, I'm totally speculating here. You may be thinking along the lines of lending and some federal incentives that may be out there for a Natrona County resident or any United States resident that wants to apply for a home loan. There may be some advantages there, but Natrona County is not receiving any federal dollars for any subdivision that occurs.
But they do apply for the grants for those.
No, I'm not aware of Natrona County applying for any grants for a residential subdivision.
When a contractor or a private person applies for a grant, the federal government goes, yes, I'll support you, but they don't give you the money. It's not a loan from the federal government. You have to go obtain a loan still. They just want.
The developer comes to us and says, we would like to develop this 40 acres, 10 acres, 100 acres into XYZ. Will you approve that?
so can I ask another question?
Yeah.
Then are you aware of the fact that part of that stipulation is, part of the stipulation is that it will have to be annexed into the city?
If that exists, we're not a party to that conversation.
Well, didn't you make the deal with Mills to do it? I mean, that was county property to begin with.
When, on the first one, that's what we refer to as spot zoning, because it was high-density housing, and it was not adjacent to any municipality. So when he came to us to do phase 2 and wanted to also put water, sewer, streets, the whole bit, we said, okay, but this time, you must agree to annex into Mills. And Mills said, absolutely, you will, if you want Mills, water, and sewer.
And they have to take the road.
And Mills had to take the roads from us, which they did. And
I
all that's
remember that.
happened.
I remember that.
See, and keep in mind that that development there was very much a town development, small lots, high density. That was intended to be in town. I think even you would agree, Linda, that your lot is bigger that you have in the county than what those lots were.
Well, I haven't driven out there really just to drive by, but my concern about the land use plan is I've heard when a zoning change is brought before the planning and zoning, that is the primary document that you always refer to, according to the land use plan, and you have 5 or 7 points that you make according to that land use plan.
And the first point, you're exactly right, is would this bring the land into compliance with the land use plan?
Okay, so that's why I'm here, and that's why that document is so important that the public is part of it.
Oh, most certainly, we want all the public comment and part of it, you bet.
Don't wait for me, go ahead. I came to get the
Chapter
presentation.
5,
Yeah.
the maps show that different areas have been moved into what I would call a neighborhood, like this is Allendale. And if a person in the past has not been in the neighborhood of Allendale, what are the implications of that?
So then, also part of chapter 5, we can go to the Allendale neighborhood, and we can see
Look
what,
at this.
we can see what the recommendations are for that.
It's,
Okay, so see.
and it shows the zoning. So but if that's been moved into the neighborhood of Allendale in the city some time ago, big issue with the county commissioners was, does the city have the right to annex the county? So if, say, our property was moved into the neighborhood of Allendale or moved into the neighborhood of Vista West, and has previously not been in that, then can the city just annex all of Allendale?
And you'd be subject to their planning laws.
Okay, so it's a good example. So we have Allendale neighborhood right here. She's in chapter 5. She's found the neighborhood of
27 and 28.
Allendale here. Right before that is neighborhood, is a
Yeah.
listing here, and we go right down to neighborhood 27. A, recommendations. Land use projection. We see it as residential infill. So if growth is going to happen, if a developer is going to come in here, they are going to grow residential.
It's in our understanding, they already bumped up behind us here. How many units is he putting in? 180 units?
Wow.
So that
Cancelled?
So that would be if a developer, ABC developer came to the Natrona County Development Department and said, I own a piece of property here in the Allendale neighborhood, and I want to put, let's use two examples. The first example is I want to do residential. So the development department's going to pull out this page, and we're going to look and say, A, recommendations, land use projections. We want to project residential infill. So we'd say check. That is in agreement with the land use plan. Now let's use example number 2. I'm a landowner. I'm right there off of Wyoming Boulevard, and I come in and say, you know, I want to do a light industrial park in there where I want to do pipe yards and industrial type uses. The development department would pull this out and say land use residential infill. Sorry, that does not meet the land use plan.
But don't
We
you
would
already
not-
have that power without this?
We need this land use plan as a document to look back on, that where there was public buy-in. No, we went through a process where the neighborhood in Allendale was part of this process, and they agreed with us. They wanted residential infill. Now, this is the time for a comment. If you'd like to see commercial or industrial, some other use in there, put it down as a comment,
Well, we just like to put a house on 10 acres.
and that is
Not have
residential.
to, not have to be, you know,
I think their concern is because they're in that neighborhood, if part of that neighborhood becomes annexed, will everybody in that neighborhood become annexed?
You have
Probably.
to be a signatory on an annexation.
Okay.
And the neighborhoods don't define an annexable area, whether it's one lot in that entire neighborhood or all of it, that's not our determination, that's the city of Casper. Or whatever municipality you're within. The neighborhoods don't define that annexation area.
And typically, think about annexation is typically tied to services. So if you wanted city water or sewer, typically they will say yes as long as you annex. But there are cases where they do not. We have a very much checkerboarded edge of the city of Casper. You could look at properties in North Casper that are county properties. We have properties right out in Paradise Valley that you drive through several miles of city ground to get to a county piece of property. So by no means is this
what page is that?
this is page 5-50. Yes, sir.
In my neighborhood, it says something about coordinating with mills for future annexation. So what does that mean about land use? I mean, I know what you said here. Is that going to be the same land use when they get it? Or they...
So what that would mean in your instance, and we can pull this exact one up, but if you came and wanted to develop your piece of property, we would want to communicate with the town of Mills to make sure that your development is compatible with them, so that the streets, the roads line up, make sure the utilities work, make sure the land use also works. Keep in mind that by state statute, all subdivisions that are within a mile of a municipal boundary, that entity has to be part of the subdivision process. So Mills was already going to be at the table, so to speak, when you developed your property, but this is supporting that language that we'd want to coordinate with them so that it's consistent with them.
where is it in this document that would give us an idea about parcel size? You know, if we're developing a piece of land, how big is the parcel, does the person have to?
That's related to your zoning document. That's that sister document to this one. And we can sure get you in contact with that and
Chapter 7.
find that for you.
Is there a zoning website or tack onto your county website?
I believe our zoning document is on the county
It
website.
is, it's on that GeoSmart.
Okay, it's in that level.
Yep, it's right on there, and when you identify, to find your parcel, you identify it, and it pulls up the zoning regulations for that district. So if you're urban ag, you can scroll through and find your district, and it gives you all your permitted uses, conditional uses, size of lot. So that's all available on there. And if you ever have any questions, if you get on there and you have questions, feel free to call and we can walk you through it. It's very, very handy tool.
Is there any idea about the timing of annexation? Do we know when that's going to happen?
That's driven by the property owners and or the developer. It's not, annexation is not driven by Natrona County. Only in the instance that Chairman Chadwick pointed to was the Keith Tyler subdivision, where we said we will approve this as a county subdivision contingent upon you annexing to the town of Mills by this date, sir.
I think the issue is
Why is he
annexation
here?
can't occur without a vote. Annexation from the city by a city of county property can't be done without a acceptance by the property owners. Is that not the case?
I have not seen a quote-unquote forced annexation, and I do not believe the city of Casper has ever done that. It's always been willing participants that want to be in the city for good reason. They want city water, they want city sewer, they want city fire protection. There's good reasons why folks want to be in the city, just the same as there's good reasons we might enjoy, us county residents, living in the county.
So why are they making it so hard to stay out in the county? I mean, on your rural residential, you have the goal, mitigate negative impacts on rural residents. Action number 3, limit high density commercial and industrial development in rural residential areas. Well, it sounds kind of cool when you read it, but when you go back through your book, it's basically telling you if you're a man that's got, say, 500 acres out there in the middle of nowhere, and you want to develop it, you're going to be bound by these new rules of that you're not going to be able to develop your property because it's supposed to be split into 35-acre lots if it's what is it? Ram zoning, and then 10. I guess the point that I'm making is why do we need all of these restrictions when we have plenty of room? I mean, it's not like we're 500,000 people and we're crammed into these little subdivisions and stuff, that we need all of these provisions put in place.
So really what that's about is we're trying to guide responsible development.
Why would you want to control somebody else's property, I guess?
Because we want to protect the property rights of the others that are there. So we take an instance where somebody has a residential piece of property over here and they want the residential or agricultural use. And rather than allowing a use that will conflict with that, like an industrial use or a pipe yard, a rendering plant.
But we have provisions for that. They're called conditional use permits. So even if somebody wanted to come into a large acreage area, like, what was it in the paper today about the folks that are wanting to rent Hell's Half Acre out there 40 miles out? Okay, they're wanting to rent it for the eclipse in 2017. I don't see an issue with that. I mean, it's sitting there, it's dead zone, it's dead area, there's no one around. But you know you're gonna get, people that are gonna be upset about it.
So let's get to probably a more germane, a better example is, again, let's use the Robertson Road example. The town of Mills was growing that direction. They were building homes as quick as they could on the far westernly boundary of Mills, headed toward Robertson Road. So had we approved a heavy industrial use, that
Which
had
was
gone
all
in-
along
gone in-
Poison Spider.
all along Poison Spider, that would have been a conflict with the residential use and growth in mills that was occurring. And we needed this land plan to guide us to say, no, we want to see industrial, commercial uses over here, we want to see industrial uses, or residential uses over here, and we want to see agricultural uses over here. And when I say we, I mean all of us, Natrona County residents. That's what we all buy into, is the direction the county is headed.
How did you come to that conclusion?
That, which part?
All of that, what you just said.
Well,
I mean, Poison Spiders Road, we know at the edge of Mills there is all light industrial and heavy industrial. You got USA Trucking, you got Patterson, what is it, oil exploration or whatever. And then when you get to Robertson Road, that area back in there where the developer developed and traded with Mills some other property so that they could have that, turned it into homes, but the only other homes were across the river.
No, there's homes just to the east of that development, so it's all
Down by
contiguous.
the horse
ranch.
You're
Yeah,
going,
he's got houses, and now there's these new little stack houses going in on the old four-way stop of Robertson and Poison Spider.
Okay.
And it's all curved, it's all curved.
I know, it's a mess. I live out there. Trust me, it's a mess.
yeah.
Well, I guess I can see why you would want certain guidelines and restrictions for land use based off of basically what is the land good for. There's certain things you can use the land for, and there's things you can't use it for. You also have to, and then I read in your document, keep track of the wildlife and cultural resources, and there's so many other things that you want to make sure you don't impact by allowing a developer to come in and do certain things with the property. We have a place out of town, about 80 acres. I don't ever see it being a densely populated place because there's no water, there's no resources, and it would also invade some of the habitat in that region. So there are restrictions, and it just makes sense to have certain guidelines and restrictions in certain properties around the county so that we can plan for our future instead of being very, like you said, I don't want a pipe yard, next door to, a school district or something like that.
Well, it didn't stop it out on Salt Creek, did it?
No.
You don't want in one end and what happens in the other.
Yeah.
So, you bring up an excellent example. So in the same instance where we are several miles from town, several miles from resources, it would not be a prudent move to approve a 50-lot subdivision with 2-acre lots that far out of town. How do we provide fire service? How do we provide county services to a high-density subdivision that's so separated from our home base, if you will? And Judy, you bring up an excellent point with Salt Creek. The land use plan, for several land use plans, has pointed that should be commercial and industrial growth, not
That was the
residential.
98 land use plan.
And the 76 land plan said the same thing.
But that's not what happened, was it?
No,
People went
to
out there
commercial.
and built homes, and people went out there and made 10-acre lots, and now they have a business park in their backyard. And that was your 98 land use plan. So the point that I was making on all of this, you cannot predict what's going to happen in the future, no matter how many ways, you try to do a scenario on it. Somebody is not going to go out there and buy 10 acres next door to a residential and put a pig farm in. It's not been done anywhere across the United States. Trust me, I research this stuff all the time. And you guys already have mechanisms in place that says, hey, you can't have a pig farm next door residential. But what you are doing is you're stopping average Joe from deciding, well, you know what, maybe I want to split this acreage that I've got that's 50 acres, and I want to give my daughter 10 of them to live on. But the way it's written, and if they continue on with what they're doing, you can only have one house on a certain amount of acreage or a certain land use. I'm saying we're already pushing ourselves into something we don't need yet. I mean, when we grow to this 111,000 people in Gasper, Wyoming, maybe land use plans will make a little better sense. But I think you're being over restrictive, and that's the only point I'm making.
What other questions do we have? We feel, what other questions?
You got a mouse in your pocket, you
No.
better.
Truly, this is Natrona County residents' document. So let's hear your comments. How does Natrona County want to grow? Yes, sir.
We had a conversation, I don't know if you remember, about how people are notified when there's a potential change in the description of the land, when you want to change it
Zone
from
change or
ag
whatever.
to residential.
Okay.
Somebody wants to come in and make a development. Do you remember our discussion about how you notify people and who you notify?
I do recall our conversation.
Has anything been done about that? Did you accomplish what you said you would do?
So we notify adjacent landowners as a minimum, and then we reach out to impacted residents in the immediate area. So what Tom's referring to is if, let's take my county, let's take my county property, for instance. So I live west of town on some property. If my neighbor wants to change his zoning, or he has a conditional use permit application in, any of those triggers, then at a minimum, I'll get notified as an adjacent property owner. And then at the department's discretion, we do reach out to broader areas and notify folks in a bigger area. We also publicly advertise those public hearings so that me as a neighbor have an opportunity to know that my neighbor over here wants to change his use to this, and if I have feelings or an opinion about that, I can voice that at both planning and zoning and the Board of County Commissioners for their consideration. Don, I think if I recall right, you wanted a much more broad notification.
Yeah, you had a quarter mile by law.
Well,
No,
it was like 360 feet
by
or
law, it's
something.
adjacent property owners.
Yeah.
So I'll use an example of there was a cell tower that was put in near Homa Hills, in between the interstate and Homa Hills. We notified all the residents of Homa Hills of that proposed conditional use permit.
And they opposed it, and it
we
still
didn't-
went through,
we
just like
didn't,
Mr. Pavick's property.
We didn't, and we use the property owners of record of the tax rolls is how we get that notice out.
Yeah, our discussion was basically what you were making your notifications on was basically too small, and it wasn't fair to the landowners, depending on where you lived. I mean, if you're out, you should have a 10-mile radius before you go to approving something, and let the people in the 10-mile radius know, depending on the lay of the land and whether it's residential or ag. I mean, if it's residential, you're not going to notify residents in a residential area 10-mile diameter.
No.
But out in our country, you should be notifying people that are further away than a quarter mile. And did you get that accomplished or not?
We reach out to I'm trying to think of the most recent example.
The higher densities, if we were doing it in Vista West, we would range between a quarter mile and half a mile because it is so densely packed. One of the cell towers we recently just did, since there were larger acreages, we did up to 8 miles. So depending on that acreage, we do make it wider to reach more people.
It's not just a hard, fast
You'd
rule,
almost have to,
quarter
because
mile or
a lot of us
8 mile.
rural landowners, our closest neighbors is 5 miles away.
Exactly.
So I just wondered if you got that accomplished, and if you did, that's great. That's all.
It's a very case-by-case assessment.
Yeah, but it sounds to me like we're starting in more of a common sense area than a strict rural area.
So, and again, that's related more to zoning. The land plan is a sister document to the zoning document.
Yeah, I'm just glad you
Yeah.
got something done.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
To go back to that Allendale, it says under developmental plan, upgrade roads, residential infill, and then the third thing is coordinate with Casper for future annexation.
So if a developer came to us in the Allendale neighborhood and said, I want to do the residential, you're calling for residential, I want to do the
Then they
residential.
annex that.
And so
Will they annex all of it or just?
So we're gonna sit down with the city of Casper and say, City Casper planner Craig Collins, we've got developer Jason Gutierrez here, he wants to do a residential development right next to the city of Casper. What things do we need to consider? And Craig's gonna say, we want the streets to line up, wait a minute, time out, we don't have enough water pressure to supply water to all that, so we need to look at booster station, a different zone, or we can't provide water in that service area. So what that's saying is coordinate with the city of Casper with that development.
Okay, thank you.
We had some latecomers come in. Please get a sign-in sheet, and we've got kind of a roadmap of where we're headed, and then a comment sheet. What other examples do we have that we can work
I'm
on?
sorry, guys.
No, keep it coming.
I've missed a few meetings, and I want to see how much you've learned. Okay, you're going on with stop businesses along the highway. Action number 5. Limit commercial and industrial development to areas having immediate and direct access to major arterials or state highways. What's that about?
That's about, if we have those types of uses, we want them to have direct access to a main roadway so that we don't have delivery trucks going through a residential neighborhood at 2 a.m. delivering goods.
Well, no, but it says limit.
Let me finish, Judy. It is about maintaining the rights of the residents or the ag community to be in their location without being imposed upon by this development. We want fire emergency services access right now to those areas. We don't want delivery trucks through the middle of the night. It's about removing those conflicts, Judy.
Okay, well then why does it say limit? That means to stop.
So we would,
Commercial and in development, industrial development along major arterials or state highways. It sounds like what you're saying is you don't want anybody along the highways.
no, we want the business
So maybe
access.
they need to reword that.
Okay, okay.
Because to me, it tells me, we don't want anybody having pipe yards along the highway. We don't want anybody along, okay, here's a prime example. Limit development on East US Highway 2026, east of Evansville. So I'm assuming they don't want any businesses along the highway. Well, I know if I'm gonna open a business, I want the best spot there is.
And we want you right there on
And
that
that's
highway.
where I wanna be, is where I'm seeing from the highway.
But we don't want, to use that as an example, we don't want a business use to be back on Mystery Bridge Road or back in the residential area where those trucks and the business activities are going through a residential neighborhood to get back and forth to it. We want them on the major arterials and highways.
So you want them on frontage road?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's why I was a little worried about the limit thing.
Limited to locations along the highway and frontage roads.
You know, because it's written as limit commercial and infrastructure to areas having
Immediate.
immediate.
So
Okay,
you gotta be
meaning you
along the
don't.
road. No, immediate means you have access to the road, right?
Okay.
You're directly on.
Okay, I'm good.
If an area is annexed, and this may not be year-round, but if an area is annexed, some of the people agree that they want to be annexed with Evansville or Mills or whatever. Do all the utilities get put in up to there, and then individuals have the choice of connecting to it? Or are they obligated to connect into it if it's feeding a section up there? And what it sounded like you were saying is, a certain area could choose to be annexed into a city if the city wanted, and other people alongside it could choose not to be if they didn't wish to be. Am I wrong? Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm quite
I
exactly
didn't catch
hearing
it.
your question.
Kind
but-
of like when Mills took over Mountain View and they made them all pay for the streets that Mountain View already had paved.
Oh, see, and I'm sorry, that wouldn't be in my realm.
If you are in the county, and you come in to apply for a home, say you're in the Allendale area like we were just speaking of, if you're within 300 feet of water or sewer, the health department will make you hook up.
We'll
So,
meet you.
Yeah,
They will not issue
exactly.
a septic system on a property that's within 300 feet of those public utilities. So at that time, you would have to work with the city of Casper, whoever your jurisdiction is, to
So
get
if
your,
we're 300 feet from the water line of Casper, they will make us,
if you apply for a building permit, they would
Yep.
most likely give you.
when it goes through a county area. All right.
Okay.
Wow.
Does that address your question?
Yeah, it does. My one question, and it may not fall into here, is future development up, say, Cold Creek, where water goes part way, but it hasn't continued further out. And I think where it stops is probably Evansville, but I'm not sure. But as it extends further out, I'm just wondering whether water will ever extend further out that way, or if you're aware of.
If you're annexed in.
It would probably be a limiting factor to elevation. You know, the Wyoming DEQ has regulations with the water pressure level in a water line. And so, of course, as we push water up the hill, it runs out of pressure. So then we build a booster station or a different water tank and we can push that water a little bit further and a little bit further, and that's how they grow. I believe what you're talking about is it's the Sandy Lakes.
Yeah, the Sandy, as it gets up.
That's a separate water district that gets water, I believe, from regional water. So regional water lines provide water to the Sandy Lakes Estate. Sandy Lakes Estates then sells taps and provides water to that area.
To that little market.
It's real similar to, I'm on the 33-mile water and sewer district. So 33-mile water and sewer gets water from Pioneer Water, which in turn gets it from regional water.
What has to happen in that case, Jason, is like a group of residents of that area, and it happened with Sandy Lakes, it happened with 33-mile road, Pioneer. They get together, they form a district, they raise the money, they get a loan from the state, they have to put the water lines in themselves and form their own district. And that's how you get the water line extended. So you would have to get your neighbors and everybody else together, form a district, and then apply to the state, apply to whatever other agencies are out there to loan money for that type
Is that
of.
what they did with like Indian Springs, where they all combined?
Yeah. Indian Springs, Webb Creek, Westland Park, all those areas out west, and they all form their own districts, and they got water from the city.
And lower density, for instance.
Yeah, I believe that was right. Sandy Lake formed their own water district, and then they got a loan from the state loan board.
And lower density isn't on city water. Do you know if they ever planned it, or?
I don't.
Or was that a choice of theirs as well?
I'm not sure about.
I think Dempsey's in the fight to stay out of the city.
Okay.
They're in a big fight. They always have been. I don't.
Well, because they want to change the zoning over there to rural to residential, which would make most of them fall out of compliance with the current codes.
Well, then wouldn't it be like everybody's grandfathered in and then eventually it would just become better, or?
Yep, you want to go to court and prove it.
Everybody from doing what they're wanting to do,
Court's expensive.
I
I was the first one to take it to court.
bet it is. I don't want
Let's try to keep it a little bit on task here.
Okay, so how many, have we figured out how many it takes to form a service district? If it's 1, 5, 7? I mean, somebody was saying,
An improvement service district?
yep, how many people
I
you
believe
need
it
to have?
takes
is-
3.
What's the minimum?
I think it is 3, is that a president?
I believe
vice
it's-
president?
And where can I find that in your zoning book?
That's not in our zoning document, that's in Wyoming state statute. Improvement
So it
service
takes 3
districts.
people to form a
And I can
service
sure get you
district.
the state statute for that.
I would love it.
It's tied really closer to the assessor and the ability to then, so they can assess themselves for that improvement and pay back that improvement.
Well, because, remember when we, what was it, I don't know, 6, 8 months ago, it was in front of the county commissioners on spending the 1 cent funds on this service improvement district, which, when the 1 cent funds came about, it was supposed to be for neighborhood roads. In fact, that's the way it was written for the ballot for most of us that even understood it to a degree. And now you have to be part of a service district to get anything done with your road. It left a lot of people with shitty ass roads with no way to get help. And I think, what was it, 250,000 you gave Chadwick for that one? To service districts only?
You know, Judy, I think I can take a swing at this.
All right, you do that.
Subdivisions, whenever we create a subdivision, again, this is going back to even another document called our subdivision regulations. What we say is if you want to have a private subdivision, those roads will be dedicated to the use of the public so that everyone can get in. Police, fire can all access these roads, but these roads will be serviced by an improvement and service district. So essentially you get a group of neighbors. The best example I can come to my mind is the Sunlight subdivision that's up off of Bryanstock Trail. You know, as you're headed up to the landfill, you make a right to the landfill, but you can go left, and there's a subdivision there, Sunlight. And they have an improvement and service district. So all of those neighbors in there are part of a district, and they all agree that every year they are going to pay an additional tax of X dollars. The assessor assesses them those dollars. So I'm just going to theoretically say it's $100 a piece. That $100 goes in a kitty, a pot, and once a year, then the treasurer then writes a check summing all the dollars, and they give it back to the improvement service district so then they can maintain those roads. What the commissioners have said is there's a lot of roads out in the county that are not covered under an improvement service district. So we have these roads that need help. So what the commissioners have said is there is some 1% funds they have set aside to help give folks a step up to improve those roads.
But it's only for service districts, right?
So they can't, to give Jason Gutierrez $200 to grade the road, that is inequitable to the rest of the neighbors. So what they've said is, Jason Gutierrez, you and your neighbors get together, form an improvement and service district, come up with a list of needs, and then come to the county commissioners, and there may be some dollars available there for us to help you out. Am I stepping out of the box too far on that, guys?
No, I think you did good on that.
It's 285 is what was allocated per year for, let's see, each fiscal year, 16, 17, 18, and 19.
Well, the reason I asked is the last time we had discussed this in a commissioners meeting, it was 250,000, and nobody who wasn't in a service district could get any help. Like the guys out there on Harvey Lane, Renana, just off of Salt Creek, they wouldn't have qualified because they were basically all renters out there. So they're never going to form a service district. So they would never qualify for those funds, is what I understood.
The intent was to give those dollars to improvement service districts to help the groups as a whole, not individuals.
Are the roads a public road then and public access?
What's that?
Would any of those roads getting those funds be public access?
Yes.
If the state does not maintain the road, then it's a private road.
Not necessarily.
County.
I was wondering about the B.B. Brooks type
Usually those types of details are spelled out when they go through the subdivision process, and there's little notes on the plat, and they're very specific to that subdivision. So we need to look at the exact plats that you're referring to and look at that exactly. Yes, sir.
Jason, I'm Michael Tyler, and I'd like a question to clarify concerning the subdivision. As you know, I have some property in Allendale, and is that a subdivision out there that is required to have access to that subdivision by county property roads?
Your property, if I'm remembering it correctly, is in a subdivision, yes. It was
Yes.
platted in the 1920s, I believe.
Yes. So currently, I have no access to my property, and I'm paying taxes on it, but there's no access to it. Should there be some way that a road could give me access to the property, not
If you build
just
it.
to the property?
This is a very specific question, and I'd love to.
If this isn't the place to do it, I'll do it another time.
Love to deal with it in a different manner. Yes, any new subdivision that would come to us would be required to have public access.
But old subdivisions don't?
A lot of old subdivisions do have access. In your specific instance, you have access off of Beverly. Your property adjoins Beverly/McKinley
No, it
in
doesn't.
the west boundary.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, well, let's talk about it afterwards.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know, I was finding it interesting.
There's like 4 more of these that we gotta come
We
to.
can pull it up here on this, and if you want folks to be part of the conversation, I'm willing to do that.
I like information.
Yeah. Yes, we want access for everybody that has a piece of property. You know, and.
But you get to pay for it. And then they'll annex it.
Well, it shouldn't be landlocked.
Yeah,
If it's landlocked, how do you turn around and ask your neighbor?
you ask your neighbors for an easement.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well,
Better have a stile for your kids to walk across this fence or something.
What other questions do we have?
Nobody? All right, next one. Policy 1, residential development will be encouraged in the urban area to reduce need for rural services. Okay, I have a problem with that.
Okay, so let's
Simply
start at the
based-
top.
Policy, residential development, oh, it's policy 1 in public services and facilities, since he brought that up. Okay, residential development will be encouraged in the urban area to reduce the need for rural services. See, and I have a problem with that because there are still people that want to live on the outskirts of town. They don't want to live in urban centers, and they don't want to live in the city, and they still pay their taxes, and most of them will be on their own septic systems, and most of them will probably be pumping their own water. Okay,
And what we're saying in that is residential development will be encouraged in the urban area. So let's look up, see if we have definition of urban area.
Yeah,
What we're
look up.
talking about is if we are doing residential development adjacent to a municipality, we want
to reduce
the need for rural services. So we don't
you don't want to pay for
encourage-
more infrastructure, right?
We don't want to have to build another county fire station on the edge of town to serve a high density right adjacent to a municipality, when we're going to want to encourage.
To live in the urban areas where it's lower or higher density.
To your comment, if you,
Well, the reason I brought
we
it
allow
up-
residential in.
The reason I brought it up is because right now, I know of several people trying to build houses out in the rural areas, that they're going through some tough times getting permits for building. The building costs have increased astronomical on them. It's almost like they're discouraging you to live on the outer skirts.
No, we have.
Check out your building, check out what it's costing 5 years ago for building a pole barn to what it costs you today to do it.
And
And
our
what you
fees-
gotta go through, just in general, you can look at ours, you can look at another county around the state, because there's only 4 of us that even thought to even do planning and zoning. Okay, there's 20 counties that don't want nothing to do with it, and this is part of the reason why. Is because if you're gonna build a pole barn 5 years ago, it was $200. Now it's like $400 at EPA, you gotta have inspections. All of these new rules that keep coming in to do the basics of what we've been doing for 100 years on our lands without it. And that's kind of what one gal emailed me about today, and that's the reason I'm here tonight.
You bet, and I'll be more than happy to go further on that. We've had a building department in Natrona County since about 1976. We have required building permits since then. We have not raised our fees since 2000, so 16 years ago. So all of our fees process is nearly identical to what it was then. The building costs are related to material costs and things beyond our control.
Do you remember how many employees you had in 1976?
I
Or
don't
do you
get that
know?
exact answer. In those years, the city of Casper provided the building services, so it was actually, you went to the city of Casper and applied for a building permit, and they went out and did the inspections.
How many
I
do we
believe it
have
was
today?
It was a 3-person staff. You had a building official and 2 inspectors. And what we have today is a building official and one inspector.
And what's your budget?
I'd have to look that up, Judy.
I know you didn't expect me, okay.
But again, building department stuff is not related to this. This is the land use plan. That's what we're here this evening to talk about, is when a developer comes to Natrona County and says, I want to do X, Y, Z, is that what we all agreed upon should happen in that area?
Nobody? God, was I the only one doing homework?
I was just curious about the new road. That's what this is about.
The new road.
Well,
Belt
the
loop?
new Outer Pass Road. I don't know what
West
the
Belt
road.
Loop? Okay.
I don't
Belt
know
Loop.
the names of things.
No,
I
you're
just
good.
know
We
where
all know what
it's
you're talking
at.
about, the West Belt Loop? Yep.
Yeah, went driving out there and, well, the gas station got tore down and.
Clark's Corner? No.
Well, Clark's
Used to be
Corner
trails
went
on it.
out, and then
That's
there's
it.
the one down, the red one on the right before you go out. That one got tore down just, what, last year, year before? It wasn't that long ago, it just got tore down. It used to be a gas station, it was sitting vacant for.
Trailside.
Trailside.
Yeah.
Or is that what you're referring to, the one on 220?
Yeah.
So that was all private driven and Natrona County didn't,
Well, yeah,
So
it ain't no one's fault that it happened, but I mean, are we gonna turn around and start developing it out there?
They have development
Because
plan
it's
for
going
that whole road,
and that was in,
from out there all the way in.
that is related to the efforts the highway department went through before they constructed it. And they invited public comment, they invited landowners, they said we project, I believe, right at the intersection of West Belt Loop and 220, they saw that as a commercial use in there. So they saw things like gas stations, and, if you will, a truck stop. They saw,
why wasn't Spider cut in half?
well, that's a highway department conversation that
It was a
had to do
crazy
with-
deal. It's
it would
800
be-
pages, honey, your head would blow up if you read it.
It would have to do with their requirements to build that bypass road.
Yeah, I guess that's part of the.
The key takeaway from that, though, is we have incorporated their recommendations into ours, so when a landowner adjacent to the West Belt Loop decides they want to develop it or they want to sell it,
Yeah.
we'll look back to this land use plan and say, okay, what did we all agree upon? We agreed that there was only access points at certain locations. We agreed that there was going to be a frontage road system. We agreed upon all these terms to.
And that's all in this pamphlet.
Yes, it's in the West Belt Loop corridor study, and we've got that.
Yeah, and that's,
You know, the takeaway in that, there's a couple pullouts in there. I'd recommend you pull those out, and it's got shaded for proposed land uses in there.
that was a loss of a lot of good agricultural land. And part of your guys' deal was supposed to be protecting agricultural lands. And I don't see a lot of that happening. I see areas that, you know, have had families in them for decades and centuries, you know, who started in them, now have business parks in their background and in their backyards. And, you know, I don't quite.
So let's use this land plan to prevent that. Let's use this land plan to say.
No, it's up to you guys to stop that. You're the decision makers.
I would argue
You know?
that Natrona County is the decision makers through this document. So
Well, if
give
that
us-
was true, Jason, then why would a petition with 52 people saying, we don't want this in our backyard, you know, and 2 or 3 county commissioner meetings saying, we don't want this, why were they rolled over then? What we say means nothing.
I would say that I believe you're talking about Salt Creek again. Salt Creek.
That is the biggest boondoggle I had ever seen.
The land use plan, the prior land use plan called for industrial and commercial development. The current land use plan called for industrial and commercial development. So when we went through this process, there wasn't a consensus that, no, we want residential. The consensus was it's going to be industrial and commercial.
Yeah, but the consensus was from 1998. We're talking 2016, we're talking like, you know, almost 20 years later, after people had moved in and built their homes and, you know, started their lives again. And here we've got business parks popping up out in these rural areas. Why aren't they using these derelict spots all along the highways? Because they don't want to have to pay to decompose the building and tear them down. I would like to see them be forced. if you want to do this, then you need to do it in a pre-existing spot that needs to be redeveloped, instead of them making a new, because you guys are always talking about footprints and you know, making things more condensed. Well, let's use what's already been derelict, instead of allowing these guys to walk in and say, well, you know what, I like that 20 acres of pristine land. Well, why don't you develop that 20 acres over there that looks like crap, and it's got a building on it that looks like crap? You know, and you guys are the decision makers. And we look to you to really, really take this into account.
The guy that sold that property up there, he's got rights too.
Well, I'm sure he does. But when you got 52 people saying, you know what, we don't want it, and you go against those 52 people because he happened to make a phone call to a commissioner.
You know, Judy, we're way off base here. We're talking about a zone change that occurred off the Salt Creek Highway, and that's really not the purpose of today's evening.
Well, that's how that stuff works, though, and I think these people should be aware of it.
Yeah.
Jason, I think it is, because we do have a current development plan that, the county has a development plan that is referred to in every zoning meeting and what have you. It's a 1998 plan. The 1998 plan is in effect. This plan is no more than an update of that to reflect the changes that have occurred in the community, many of which there are very, very few changes, but they are currently operating under a plan. The Salt Creek Development Plan had perceived from the 70s that whole Salt Creek area section was going to be moving to commercial and industrial away from residential.
But that didn't happen, did it?
It did happen.
It didn't happen for 20 years.
But it did happen. It was that way in the 1970s when I was growing up as a kid, and it slowly but surely crept up. More demand occurred when the economy took off. But that was a perception of how that was going to change. Now, you take a look at the statistics that were given by KLJ on what the population growth, those statistics were put in place in order to determine what demand was going to be in 2000, over the period of time to 2040, for the amount of residential housing, and how many, given the estimated densities, how much acreage was going to be required over the next 25 years in Natrona County for residential development. So if the population isn't going to go up, then less territory is going to be required for residential development, so there will be less impact on the community. The question is, when you want the residential development to occur, and you want to avoid the conflicts such as we have in Salt Creek, have had any number of times over the years along Salt Creek and other places where we have industrial development up against rural residential or residential. Where do you want that to be?
Well,
Now,
you guys said you would make buffer zones.
Most of the changes in this document
Aren't a fact of reality.
The description of where things are now are mostly similar to what they were in 1998 and 1976.
I'd have to beg to differ with you. Terry Wingert once said, you guys had the 1998 land use plan, and it has sat on the shelves for 20 years. You didn't go by it, so now you're going to want to fall back on the 98 land use plan, which you never used.
Oh, no, the 98 plan has been adopted.
Well, we know it was
it's a
adopted,
legal document.
but it sat on the shelf gathering dust for 20
Exactly
years.
right.
And in the
Terry Wiggins
meanwhile,
is the
people
one that-
moved in.
He's also the one that says, I don't want to update it. I don't want to spend the time. Oh, we spent so much time putting that 1998 document together, I don't want to spend the time to do it.
No, yeah, he did say that.
And so you've got a document that is a binding document now. It is used and referenced in every commissioner's hearing and in the planning and zoning commissioners. The question is, do you want to take a look at that and see how that relates to the real life today, and whether or not the decisions the commissioners may be making, or the planning and zoning may be making, make sense for what may occur over the next 20 or 25 years?
And like I pointed out in the first part of this meeting, the first 5 topics, we don't have the employment anymore. So all 5 things that these guys are doing have no bearing on what our future is going to look like in a bust.
But we don't know what the future's gonna look like. That is.
So why are we making plans all the way to 2040?
Well, in 2040.
Wouldn't it make more sense to do 5 years at a
2040
time?
is 23 years ago, 23 years from now, isn't that right? 24.
Yeah, that's a long time.
1980 lasted until about 2000. Isn't that 20 years?
Look at your own stuff, guys. You got employment up here, and this is the reality of it. This is not fantasy land we're working in.
Did we have to update this plan because now?
Every 5 years. That's all you're required.
There is a point in here that I want to point out. Okay, here it is, under the purpose of the development plan, last paragraph. This plan is intended to be a living document.
That's the first problem with it.
Should be monitored and the plan reviewed every 5 years.
5 years.
And updated every 20, or as needed to reflect the changing conditions and values.
Or needed. So we don't have to go 25 years out or 40 years out. We can go every 5 years and reflect what we're actually doing, and not some fantasy land for $70,000 by some Joe who doesn't even live here. I'm sorry, go ahead, don't let me.
If it hasn't changed in 5 years, they don't need to change this until 20 years.
Well, look at what we changed in the last year. Just in 1 year. We went to 7% unemployment. What do you think's gonna happen next year, boys? Do you think they know any more than you do?
I came here in the 90s, and when I got here, it was dead. The whole city was just dead. And then 98 came along. I started really working out on the rigs, and just all of a sudden, all these people just started flooding into this town in 2000, 2001, and then just kept on coming.
And we had building going on crazy. We had subdivision applications coming through.
Yeah.
And we want to be prepared when that happens.
Yes.
And so we've got to have a roadmap so we can deal with
Yeah,
that.
but not so strict. I mean, you've got rules in here where, you know,
But
just,
for me to go out and just to build my own little shack that I can live in, where does it come in that it can't be made out of straw? Or
okay, so
I mean,
yeah, so you're.
that's your planning and zoning code thing.
No, that's not, Judy.
Well, I mean, I'm not wanting a straw building. I mean, I understand how to kind of like build a board, but.
So Judy made an earlier point early on that there are folks that want the county lifestyle. They want to build a home in the county. They want to live in the county.
Yeah.
Have another
all
cocktail
of our
today.
zoning districts, all of our zoning districts allow for residential, heavy industrial.
And commercial.
And commercial, with the exception of heavy industrial and commercial zoning districts. We allow residential living.
Yeah, but look at the hoops you gotta go through to do anything, my
So
God.
if you own a 5,000 acre ranch, if you own a 35 acre ranch, if you have a 10 acre piece, if you have a piece of Natrona County property that's not zoned, one of those two deals, a single family dwelling is a right of use. So if you want to build a home on there, you want to have that county lifestyle like I enjoy, certainly you come down to the building department and say, I want to build a home on this piece of property. We fill out some paperwork, we ensure that it's a safe building for you to be in.
When I went down there, they told me I couldn't get a building permit until I had utilities on.
There you go, and that's how this works.
And I've been through the process 3-4 times. I've never owned the house, but I've met you before. The other two, I kind of
I'd have to
here and there, but.
I mean, don't you feel the strangulation on what you want to do?
I can't just go and do what I feel is comfortable for myself. You know, we should be free to be in our own skin, you know.
From the building code point of view is you have to think about when you build that home and then you decide to sell that piece of property and the next guy that moves in there. So there's a reasonable expectation.
That's the next guy's understanding that I built the home. And
buyer beware.
I mean, if you look at me and you buy a home from me, I mean, come on. Well, really, if you buy a home from me, dude, I wouldn't.
There's also guys that look and say Natrona County has a building department. So therefore, any home I buy in Natrona County, I have an understanding that it meets a minimum code standard.
Yes, and I understand when I do my wiring in my house, you guys are not watching me rewire my hot water heater.
Well, and see,
I can still burn that down.
let's look at it a different way. Building codes are the basic minimum that folks need to do. I would be willing to bet you're going to build above minimum building code. Lion's share of everyone builds above the minimum code. The folks that build below code are typically shocked when I say the floor joists on this are too far spanned. Oh, I didn't realize that. No problem. Let me put a bigger member in right there to hold the weight that's on there. So
Yeah, I always had a problem when I laid down floor joists that wasn't lining up with 4x4.
So anyway, afterwards, let's get to your specific example about not having utilities, because utilities are not a threshold for getting a building permit.
Well, she told me that I couldn't have, well, she gave me a permit for it, and then she told me that I couldn't have it until I get utilities out there. What utilities would I have to have?
Yeah, we'd have to talk about your specific, it sounds.
Barren land?
Sounds like more hoops. Jump through a
Well,
hoop, jump
you
through
know,
a
and
hoop.
I know I need to go down and do my own septic, you know, go through the health department. I need to come down here to find out about the well, and it needs to be so far away from something, and I have to have somebody else pay for
DEQ.
that, and it's like, wow. I'm already at $15,000 just to be on this land, and it's like.
Okay, so anyway, we digressed a little again.
Yeah.
We're here on the land plan. I'm more than happy to talk about building.
Well, we were dying. We weren't having nothing to talk about, so.
But I like Benzie acres too.
Do the housing one. Policy 1, equitable enforcement codes for health, safety, and welfare of county residents. Continue to provide fair and equitable enforcement of adopting building codes. We're under what, federal building codes now, or are we still local level?
They are international building codes.
Okay, so we
that
gave
are
those
adopted-
rights away,
That
okay.
are adopted by the Natrona County commissioners on every code cycle.
Okay. Boy, I wish they hadn't have done that, huh? Okay, policy 2, dangerous buildings. Encourage elimination of unsafe and dangerous buildings which are hazardous to public health. Okay, 2 questions on that. How are you going to determine what is hazardous to public health versus what's on a private person's land?
All right, so we adopted the abatement of dangerous buildings, the 1995 code on that. And I'm more than happy to get you a copy of that. And in there, it very specifically identifies deficiencies that deem a building dangerous and unsafe to enter. And the most common example of that is a building that's had a fire in it. So we get a home that has had fire in it and is structurally unsound because it's had that fire, then we will deem it a dangerous building. The property owner is given a time frame to remedy that solution. Upon not remedying that solution, then the property owner is to remove the structure. This routinely happens. It's not, there's not a conflict there. When folks have a fire, the first thing they do is tear down or repair the structure. So what that's about, Judy, is as a community, we don't want to have dangerous buildings out there as a public nuisance.
Well, the reason I brought it up is because she said something about, like out there at the Brewer Ranch. You know where it is, Rob. Those have been there, God, since I was 18 years old and came to Wyoming.
The building?
Yeah, all of that's been there. And it's going to continue there, right? You wouldn't call those dangerous buildings, would you?
Depends on if they had a fire in it.
Well, and there's not a whole lot of public out at the brewer.
I don't know, it's kind of a little stop for a lot of people that roll through.
Not the brewer place.
Yeah, it's got the house there, it's got the barn, it's got, you know, I mean, it's right, it's picture perfect for a postcard for Wyoming. Are we gonna let that stand, or are we gonna force those guys to tear it down because it might be a public
Are
safety?
you talking about the Stone Ranch? Or the
That's
brewer
it,
place?
yep, the Stone Ranch.
All right, now let's get on the same.
Yeah, because brewers have their corral and,
Yeah, brewers have a corral.
yeah.
It's a ranch.
You're right, you're right. It's been a couple weeks since I've been
The
out
Stone
there.
Ranch, one problem there is it's on the National Registry, nobody can touch it.
Is that what it is? Okay.
You can't clean it up, the cows are in it, but nobody can build a fence around it, because it's on the National Registry.
And it's just that one spot or what?
Just that stone building. And the old building in the back's fallen down, you can't touch it because it's on the National Registry. And so it's imploding on itself.
Where could I find that? How would I type that up to even?
It's probably in the.
It's gotta be in the state, yeah, you
It's
should
the
be able
old
to do
state
it.
stop, it's the Stone Range.
Is that going on 2026?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's picture perfect for a postcard for Wyoming.
Not much anymore.
So to be on the historical register,
Yeah,
Yeah, how do you do that?
the property owner has to want to do that. So the property owner, at some point, to be on
So
the
somebody
historical
must own it then,
has
right?
to initiate that process.
oh, Robinettes own it, is that right? I didn't know that.
Vern Robinette, I think, is the one that put it on there, he's the one that owned it.
If they don't maintain it, does it ever come off of that?
No.
No,
There
it's
is
safe forever.
I got a phone call from a couple in Lander that wanted to raise money to fix it up. But they've got to be very careful if it's on the National Registry, how they fix it up. And who does it and all that good stuff.
Yeah, because it's
And
gotta
I'll
go
tell
to
you, it's not-
original.
Oh, this is
I'm not sure it's worth fixing.
You're better than making an identical one next to it. And then-
Well, you can fix up the stone wall and that's about it. The outbuildings are just about gone.
Yeah, no, I enjoy looking at it myself, but that's why I was asking.
The structures I've been part of that specifically were buildings that had been in fire or were so badly dilapidated, and there was children in the neighborhood. It was an attractive nuisance where they were going into the structure.
I've heard
and it was
about
quite
that.
literally leaning severely, that at any moment we're worried it was going
Right.
to collapse. Those are the types of structures we go through that process on. Yes.
I have a question about children in the neighborhood. I've heard that brought up several times.
Yep, attractive nuisance.
Don't we have private property rights where the children in the neighborhood aren't supposed to come on your private property?
They can, and you're liable for it, even with a trespassing sign, believe me.
Yeah, it's a fence outlaw around,
Some
Natrona
of
County.
the swimming pool, and it would be an attractive nuisance that break in.
You can't put up traps either to catch animals.
There you go.
What else you got?
All right, in your transportation section, main policy 2, Natrona County shall maintain only those roads designated officially as county roads. Now this goes back to your public road, private road. I think McDowell said at one time in a television interview the difference between a public road and a private road. Okay, so let's slap in there the service district road. Now, is that a public road or a private road?
So improvement and service districts are for the maintenance of things. So I think a more direct answer to your question, Judy, is you need to look back at the plat that created that road, that dedicated that, and there'll be language in there whether it is dedicated to the use of the public or not.
Okay.
I think that's truly always the heart of those
Well,
conversations.
the only reason that I even circled it again is over the service district thing. I think it was done inappropriately, and I think the money being allotted only to a service district is totally leaving out too many people that have roads that are used as public roads, but actually they're really private roads. I'd like to see that revisited and maybe worked a little different for the folks that are out there, like on Harvey Lane, Renana Avenue, because they're school buses. Some of those holes, you could lose a whole school bus in. And I mean, just because they can't cough up, X amount of dollars to fix it, I don't think we should neglect them, because when they voted for the 1-cent fines, they also voted for thinking that that was part of the reason they voted for it, was they were going to get help with their roads. So that's my only comment with that. I think that's it for me, guys. I mean,
Yes.
So Trish has notes about your comments, Judy, and we'll make sure those are written out, and we'll email them to you to make sure that we've got them written down correctly as you want them presented.
I'll just ask the guys at the meeting what happened or whatever, but I appreciate your candor tonight, really. I came with as much as I could put together in a couple of days on this, but I still think we're stepping too heavy on the landowner. I think we're requiring too many regulations on them. I think we could revamp this a little bit better to where it's not quite so many hoops to jump through to do basic things of, you know, letting your kids move onto your land or happen to belong to a service district to get help with your roads. I do think the first 5 criteria with the first 5 of them, because the employment is not there. I think KLJ needs to go back and revisit that aspect of it altogether. I guess that's all I got for that, so thank you.
No problem. Did you catch the first part of it, Judy? We've got the roadmap, if you will, for this process.
Do I have?
I want to make sure you have that.
I think I do. Update. Oh, when you guys are doing this stuff?
Yeah, so.
Yeah, no, I got 'em.
So notice all public comment by May 4th, and then we'll follow that by 3 work sessions with planning and zoning. And then we
Are there going to
conclude,
be any commissioner meetings with us?
there will be, at the very end, after the planning and zoning hears, they go through their work sessions, and then they'll have one public hearing, or if there is a
Okay.
lot of unresolved items, those dates are tentative, and we'll,
I
we
still
want to
say,
have this all ironed out at the lowest level possible. So,
and I'd
we
like to
start
see
with
a little
staff
more
comments.
public input on this. I mean, we're talking, what, 4 landowners here at the end of 2 hours? There's 22,000 of us out in the county.
No way.
Yeah, about that.
Only 20.
I don't know, they might be gone now, but they were the last time I checked.
Yeah.
But,
We want to resolve all the issues with planning and zoning work sessions and have this ironed out before it gets to the county commissioners. So if you have comments, concerns, please get them to us by the May 4th.
I think you got them.
What's that?
May 4th?
Yes, sir, May 4th.
Is there another public meeting?
Not until
The
after.
next public meeting would be the adoption of the land plan at planning and zoning, tentatively scheduled for June 14th. But again, if you have comments, turn them in, and planning and zoning is going to review those comments. That's why this comment form is so valuable. They are going
Well, I
review
want to
those
make sure they're
comments.
going to actually listen to us this time. I mean, I can pack these rooms with people in opposition to this crap, but unless you guys actually take it serious,
You should have invited
there's
them
no
to
point.
tonight.
There's no point for us to take off work. There's no point for us to show up if you're not listening to us. You know, and I just want to add one more thing. This is an election year, and we're serious this year. We're gonna do some house cleaning on city and counties because we're tired of not being listened to. I mean, my videos are hitting 200 and 300, you know, for people watching and what I'm watching when I go to these meetings, and that tells me there's something wrong.
So let's, Judy, to your point, let's get this ironed out in planning and zoning, and let's get the community voice out there. So let your constituents know that we want their comments. We want to address their concerns.
Thank you.
I have another question.
Yes, ma'am.
How much is this tied to federal and as far as planning and zoning is concerned? Federal grant money?
There is no federal grant money associated with this.
State money?
There is, the only monies that are involved in this is the salaries of myself, Trish, and
Taxpayers.
staff.
So there's no grants or, you know, business council or infrastructure money or,
I believe the Wyoming Business Council, through a grant, paid for the KLJ update that was completed here. That was completed in 2014. And we'll get you, we owe you that dollar amount, Judy. But that was provided as state funding. Other than
Yeah,
that-
no, I've got a
Other
copy
than
of
that,
all
all of
this,
this effort into updating this has been done internally.
I'd just like to see it not quite so restrictive.
If I read this right, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, there'll be no public comment after tonight until June 14th?
That's correct. If
Only
you have
by these
public,
forms.
if you have public comment, or if you have comment, they need to be documented on these forms and turned into us prior to May 4th, up to May 4th.
And somebody who has never heard about this or involved in this, but wanted to be, and they attended a session on the 9th, 16th, and the 23rd. Is it my understanding that they wouldn't be allowed to comment at all for any reason?
It'll be a work session environment, so we'll treat those the same as the county commissioners. So you can be in attendance and hear them go over your comments. So if you had a comment that I want to see more industrial growth in this neighborhood, then you'll hear planning and zoning talk about that. But at the conclusion of every planning and zoning, we have planning and zoning chairman Harold right here this evening with us. At the conclusion of every planning and zoning, he's afforded a public comment section.
So that somebody who hadn't had a chance to write a comment, but did get knowledge of it and went to one of the zoning planning commission meetings, at the end of that meeting, he or she would be allowed to make a comment if they had one to make? Thank you. It's not the way I read this, that's why I asked.
I know, stuff isn't reading right, is it?
Jason, those work sessions are different though.
So,
And that's,
Yeah.
so let's get out a better example. Jason Gutierrez puts a comment on here that in his neighborhood, he wants more commercial. I was trying to think of something decent here. I want more industrial development in my neighborhood, or in this neighborhood, or I want more residential in my neighborhood. So I put on that form, I want more residential development. So that comment then goes to planning and zoning. Planning and zoning is going to get that. We're looking to look at, say Jason lives in the Allendale neighborhood. So planning and zoning is going to look at that and say, if we have a comment that says they want more commercial growth, and we're going to look at our staff and say, the reason why we were looking at residential was it's in the city of Casper's growth boundary, and they forecast that as being residential. Industrial would be non-compatible and wouldn't work in that area. So we would put that as a response in there. But then at the end of the meeting, Jason could stand up and say, oh, you really didn't hear what I said. I wanted this. And if they wanted, planning and zoning wanted staff to hear more about it, we would go back and revisit it.
Well, I'm sure that I've got a lot of people in my organization haven't heard of this period. And I'm going to put it in a newsletter of these 3 meetings, and I'm sure that there's going to be somebody that's going to want to.
We'd love to email you a PDF version of this that you could share with your constituents.
it's online on our website as well.
Well,
You'll have the work sessions, but then you'll have 2 public meetings also.
right, I'm just trying to get the feel of whether they're going to be able to attend and told they can't talk or not. But I'm told that, yeah, if they attend, they'll be allowed to speak.
As long as it's public meeting and not work
So that
session.
isn't the way I read that, Rob, and I want to clarify it, that's all. And I'm going to send a note out to everybody.
There'll be one at planning and zoning and one at the commission.
So
Work
One
sessions.
at planning and zoning and
Yeah,
one at
that's
the
why I said work
commission.
sessions you don't.
And those 2 you would not be able to.
I'll just put the information out, let my people decide what they want to do. And there's 1,200 of them, they got the right to know.
That's right.
And again, the reason why we put tentative in there, if we get into this process and just forecasting, if we get into chapter 5 and there is a lot of distress, if you will, there's a lot of debate, passionate debate about an item, staff's not going to recommend that we just keep pushing it along. Staff's going to say, time out. Let's back up. If we need to have another open house like we have tonight and talk about the Allendale neighborhood and its future, let's do that. Let's get it solved at the lowest level,
Right.
so that we can all the voices can be heard. Okay.
Now, public comment, if we like our neighborhood exactly as it is, it's wonderful, everybody works together, we don't want it changed, can we put that in as our public comment?
And I would encourage you to look at where, let's find the neighborhood you're referring to, and let's see if there's been, what the recommendations are in the land plan, so that that is in line with your expectation.
That's sad, man, sticking us into little bitty boxes. That's horrible.
We have,
You know?
we established them by neighborhoods.
I mean, that's not what we bought when we bought it. We were in these little bitty boxes when we bought them. I mean, and here you guys come along, well, now we think industrial is better over there. According to who?
And we want to hear that.
You know?
Let's share that with us, yeah. What else, guys? And again, there's more questions. You've got my cards out here. It's email Trish. Come in, see Trish or I. We're available.
I have a question about buildings in town. You know, we talked about whether, you know, if it had fire or something, it needs to be tore down. But I see a lot of buildings in this town that are being torn down, that are really good buildings, that they haven't been up that many years. Is there a policy about blight or something? Is there a reason that we're tearing these buildings down?
Give me an example.
Down by Big Old Tires, there was a Spanish style thing. At one time, I think it was a restaurant, and then it was.
That was a haircut place. You think of the same one?
Yeah.
And I believe that was the property owner elected to tear that down. Nobody forced that demolition of that building. That was a private property owner's motivation.
It seems like I've seen a lot of buildings that are.
And again, that's within the city of Casper's jurisdiction. Do you have any examples out in the county that have happened recently?
So what you're saying is, he told me wrong, nobody wrote it.
Yeah.
Just one other concern that I would have is
If he says now he's the commissioner,
such
and he says
small
they
groups
can,
of
you're
people
gonna say they can't.
having such a large stay, what all is going to take place, and things being rigid,
He's gonna allow you to say what they want to say. Are you telling me you're gonna?
like the fight that was going on in Salter, you know, back in '98, the plan was to make it industrial, and there's people that lived out there for 20 years that didn't know the plan. I know we have to plan ahead to be prepared for things, but at the same time, my concern is.
I just came to break the laws, babe, you know that.
We go through, we can implement something that in 10 years we don't want.
But remember, we're speaking here that we can do every 5 different. Remember back at that beginning, implementation should be monitored and the plan reviewed every 5 years. So we give us that flexibility to readdress it every 5 years.
Okay, so these things can be readdressed.
Yeah, it's a living document. It's intended to be a living document. Living document.
Is this tied at all to UN Agenda 21 or UN Agenda 2040?